We're shooting for a human right now. And we'll find out on November 17th if it's a boy or a girl. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Alaina. I will be guiding you through our little tour of leg cramps this morning. We like to get started just to kind of get to know everybody. So, I'm Alaina. I've been doing this since 2005. I've been very blessed to work with some great professionals who've always pushed me to that next level. So if you notice there's more letters after my name than in my name, those are certifications that each took a good amount of time to go and work with some of the best people around the country and learn some of the cutting edge things that are going on. So when it comes to leg cramps, this isn't a topic that people get a lot of good information about. If you try to, how many of you have Googled leg cramps? Yeah. Try to find something to do about it. And you hear everything from drink tonic water to eat mustard before you go to bed, to you hear the whole spectrum of things. And today we're going to talk about why there's so many different options out there and why some of them work for some people and don't for others. And look at the causes of leg cramps so you can look at what particular combination of issues most applies to you and you can start to do something about it. So this is a small group. We've got everyone spaced out. If you feel the need to stand up, walk around. If you want to come lay down on one of the tables while we're talking, get comfortable. It's a very informal environment. Definitely just speak up if you have any questions along the way. I'm happy to answer as many questions as you have. This isn't a really, some of our presentations are long and have a ton of information. This one's probably about 45 minutes, so we'll have plenty of time for questions and hanging out and answering further things at the end if you don't feel comfortable speaking up as we present. So the first thing I'd like to do is get to know a little bit about those of you who are here today and what's going on with you and leg cramps. So would you care to start us off with just your first name and what's going on?
Okay, my name is Lynn.
L-Y-N-N?
Just one N.
Okay.
And I don't have them all the time, so I haven't figured out what might be causing them. Mm-hmm. But sometimes middle of the night, sometimes morning. And they aren't always just in my calf. Sometimes they're kind of like in my ankle, mm-hmm. and I can't walk them off, which is the pits in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Have you found anything that helps them?
No.
Hopefully we'll have some suggestions for you today.
So.
My name is Barb.
Hi, Barb.
I had them most severely when I was going through a spout of diarrhea, so I got negative electrolyte issue, where my legs felt like 2x4s, and especially mostly from my knee down, and my foot did weird things. It wouldn't bend, and my toes were at weird angles, and Pedialyte has helped, salt water has helped. Sometimes I don't have them at all. Sometimes I have them in succession night after night after night.
Did I spell weird wrong? Is it E-I-R-D? It's funny how I won a spelling bee in the 7th grade. You'd never know it because I use spell check so much now. Okay.
I also try and stretch before I go to bed. I will say I'm not religious with that.
Mm-hmm. After we get done talking, you won't be so concerned about not being religious with that. We'll talk about it. Okay, thank you, Barb.
Hello, my name is Val. V-A-L.
Val.
Yes.
It's another thing, you get used to watching people's lips, and then you don't see them. It's like, oh, I gotta use my ears. What's going on, Val?
I have had them for a couple years. Doctor thought it was from the statins that I was on. Turns out I haven't been on the statins now at all for a month, and I'm still getting them. I have them in my front of my leg. I have them in my arches. I have them in my calves. I never have them in my upper leg. I don't know who might have that. I was taking the G2 upon the doctor's recommendation, 8 ounces. Makes no difference.
The Gatorade G2?
Yeah, makes no difference. I did get a suggestion from my podiatrist to take magnesium tablets, which
Mhm.
I've been taking for about a week.
How are those doing?
I'm not sure how long that's going to take effect.
Okay.
How long I have to take them to take effect. I had a suggestion also of taurine, an amino acid that I haven't taken yet. I just found out that this morning. But also, I'm like probably everybody else, my legs turn to wood. I can't walk. Sometimes I'm crying like a baby because they're so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's, I'm keep telling the doctor, I have a leg disease.
Yeah.
He's like, no, you don't. So, I don't know.
And it can be incredibly frustrating
Yeah.
to not get a very clear answer
I
there.
was okay thinking that it was the statin
Mhm.
because that was the reason.
Yeah.
Now that I'm not on the statin at all, it's like, okay, now what is it?
And we're sisters, so.
Yes.
We're curious.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to know.
That's what everybody wants to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My name is Ann,
Hi, Anne.
and I have been having cramps for, it seems like ever,
Mhm.
but they've been increasingly worse as my feet and legs have become increasingly worse, and I know part of it's maturity, comes with poor balance and all the above. But my cramps are everywhere. They're in the feet, they're in the calves, and the worst ones I get that last for 30 minutes or more are in the upper thigh and the groin area.
Okay.
And even my therapist didn't know how to stop it the other day. I mean, ice will stop it for a while. I spend more money on lidocaine spray,
Does it help?
lotion, which I bathe in at night. Last night I had cramping in my feet, and they feel like there's a vice that's pushing against your feet. You can't walk, you
Mhm.
can't stand, and it's every 2 hours, all night long.
Okay.
You're exhausted when you wake up. So I am going to a neurologist. He's going to be doing tests. I don't know. I take all of the recommended potassium, magnesium, you name it. It doesn't seem to help at all. I'm trying to drink more water. I drove to Hilton Head and had 2 major cramps, had to get out.
While you were driving?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
When I stopped, when I started to get out. And my feet and legs ache most of the time. So I'm just kind of looking for different options. Don't have a lot of hope. Keep looking for that magic pill that might help, whatever.
That's supposed to be a magic pill, by the way. We'll pretend. I didn't go to school to be an artist.
I'm Daryl.
Hi, Daryl.
Daryl. I have cramps periodically.
Mhm.
They normally occur when I sit for a long time or in bed early in the morning. I usually get up and walk around.
And when you go for a walk, does it help?
Well, I just walk out where I'm at. I don't have a
Okay. But if they come on, if you get up and walk, does it turn them back down?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Oh, my handwriting's starting to, I need to put some lines on here so I can keep it straight. Yes.
My name is Mary Rose. This is my husband who is sitting next to me.
I guessed.
And I just really came to, I have pains, but not leg cramps. So I just came to support him.
Support is always good. And I'll tell you, a lot of these, when I give talks about leg cramps, a lot of times it's the spouses that make their loved one come in because they can't sleep because the other one's up and down and moving around all night. So, thank you for your support.
Hi, I'm Dwayne, D-W-A-I-N, and I have cramps most nights, like the rest of them here, lower legs and my feet, the side of the ankles, my thighs. The worst ones I get right in the middle of the knee, which I just can't stretch out.
In the front of your knee or the back?
Inside the knee. I can't say it's front or back. It's
Okay.
inside the knee. And typically if I get up and I stretch, that does help. I take the water with quinine, and that does seem to help. If I have an episode in the night, I'll get up and drink quite a bit of that water, and it does help. Like the gentleman, I just recently took a trip to Pennsylvania, and sitting for a long time, doing 550 miles, and not exaggerating, I was up 10 times that night with leg cramps.
Yeah.
And I do take magnesium. My doctor said absolutely stay away from potassium because it can mess up your heart.
Mm-hmm.
So the magnesium and the quinine are the only things that I take for it.
Okay, and do you feel like they help?
Well, again, the quinine, if I get them in the middle, it's mostly at night. The quinine in probably 15 or 20 minutes, it might be psychological, but it does help.
Okay.
And even if we're talking about leg cramps, may be relevant as well. If I'm doing some kind of work in the yard using my hands,
Mm-hmm.
my wife and I play cards, I can't, my hands just fully cramp up, I can't even hold cards.
Are you holding cards while you're working in the yard, or is that later?
That's later in the
Okay.
evening.
Just making sure I wasn't missing a new activity there. And that's a real important thing to point out that we're going to talk about.
Okay, good. Glad I mentioned it.
Yes. And
The cramps are more frequent, more pronounced. Again, if I'm working in the yard, walking on the hillside, that sort of thing,
yeah,
that just sets me up for having cramps at night.
gotcha. I'm going to ask for some help real quick. Oh. Hey, Jason. Would you care to wipe off the other side of this board so I can use both sides? I forgot I was without my presentation today.
My father took quinine pills for years when it comes to cramps, but my physician was going to give me some quinine, which is very hard to get anymore.
You can't get it.
No,
You
you
can't.
can't.
It's not even
Can't.
under prescription.
That's
You can't
right.
get it.
So, well, unless you have a certain disease, anyway.
Okay.
I tried to take it and it upset my stomach, so that was out.
Okay.
That is one thing that
Well, I get it in the diet, whatever the water is.
The tonic water?
Pardon me?
In tonic water?
My
Mm-hmm.
tonic water, yes.
They sell it at Walmart
And it's-
or in the regular grocery store.
it does seem to help.
Yeah. Now, it seems like it's just quinine and soda water, but there's sugar in there too, so keep that in mind. So some of the things that we're seeing on here, some consistent things. Pain at night tends to be in the lower legs. As it gets worse, it'll also include some of the upper legs. And I even have some people who'll get it up into their hips and occasionally other parts of the body. It's a good thing I love him. This is my husband, Jason, by the way. I don't just flirt with all the receptionists. No.
Yes, you do.
You're the only receptionist right now. Okay, I guess that would be all of the receptionists. So some of the things, and just to kind of point out some of those things that you all are mentioning, that the leg feels like a block of wood, that you just can't break it, you can't move it. That's a really common thing. So someone talking about it being over Barb mentioning, it's like my legs are 2x4s, or that it just won't go. One of the things that we look at, there's two different sides of looking at leg cramps. There's in the moment, and then there's preventing it to begin with. Thank you so much. Yeah, great job. So a lot of times people are looking at leg cramps as far as what do I do right now at 2 in the morning? I can't move. Some of you have noticed getting up and walking is like the only thing that will start to shut that down. You can't just always stretch these out. Now in the early stages, the lower level cramps, a lot of times you can just kind of move position, stretch it out a little bit, and you seem okay. And some of you may remember the days when it was just a little bit of here and there discomfort, and then it seems like it got worse to the point where you physically had to wake up, get out of bed, and go do something, or it just wasn't turning off. We're going to cover that in a little bit, but I just want you to kind of start thinking about, am I doing a reactive management, meaning what I'm doing in the middle of the night when I'm having problems, or am I being proactive and looking at some of the things that are causing those issues? And if any of you would like more paper to write on, I can get that for you as well. Just, yeah, let me grab some real quick. We have plenty.
Alaina, I did forget to mention.
Thank you.
After the cramps,
Would you like some paper?
sore for the whole.
Yeah.
I actually got some from
Oh,
Jason.
no, that's just fine. Would anyone like some paper? Perfect. I have a lot of people who will tell me it feels like I ran a marathon yesterday.
Yeah, so sore for the whole day.
Yeah, and what's happening with that cramp, the muscle will actually create little micro tears within the muscle belly itself. And I even have some people who will end up with bruising where they've basically damaged themselves, like it's cramped to that degree. So hopefully, no one mentioned having bruising with it, but it is something that we see. Okay, where was I? So the big question, the things that we're looking at, you may see a lot of people using magnesium, quinine. You might have heard to drink water. What are some of the other things you might have heard? I have heard mustard. I've heard pickle juice. I've heard take a tablespoon of vinegar. I've heard everything from castor oil to apple cider vinegar.
I've heard salt,
Salt water? Or just salt or salt water?
a little bit of salt.
Mm-hmm. What other types of things have you heard? Have you heard of zinc yet? That's a new one that they're starting to look into. The taurine, as far as getting some protein in there, I have heard of that one. That one's not as big of a recommendation that I've been seeing. But, and again, I'm looking at this in terms of what are the things that my patients are coming to me saying that they've looked up, they've tried, they've done. Now my background here, back in 2005, I was working on a transitional doctorate. So I'd graduated, and of course you graduate from school and you know everything, right? Well, I had a patient come in and I was seeing them for their back. And they just happened to mention, you know what, the back hurts, but really what gets me is these cramps at night. And I thought, that's interesting. That's not anything we learn about in school. I've talked to a couple of physicians. They're like, oh yeah, people get them. I just tell them to stretch and drink some water. And the general idea is that night cramps are the same thing as daytime cramps. For someone who's a runner or having, have you ever seen someone running in a marathon, all of a sudden they get a cramp? It's not the same kind of thing. And we've got to be mindful of it isn't the same type of thing. So back then I started asking all of my patients who had any kind of back, hip, or leg pain, do you get any night cramps? And after a couple of years, I would be talking to my mentors, like, I'm seeing this over and over and over again. Well, towards the end of that doctorate, that's actually what I did my first thesis on. My second one was for my fellowship, and I actually had a patient who had started off with nighttime leg cramps. And it just kept getting worse to the point where he was getting cramps all the way up into the groin, and he started getting them in the daytime. Okay, think about that. In the daytime. So even when he's moving, already walking, doing other things, and you could see it, where you would see these like fasciculations that look like little snakes crawling under his skin. where he would get these. And we started to be able to really tie this in to very specific causes and very specific things. And we were able to get him, he was probably one of my hardest cases. It took almost 9 weeks to get that. And he's still walking around. It's funny, my husband keeps up with him here and there. But he's able to walk and do things during the daytime. He's able to get most of a night of sleep unless he does what he knows he's not supposed to do, which we'll get in and talk about. But that became my fellowship thesis as far as looking into what are some of these other causes. So some of the things we're going to be talking about are not the things you're going to find on WebMD or Google. It's going to be, these are the things that we're looking at from having looked at this for almost 15 years now. And really, I'll tell you, every smart person I can find, I'm picking their brain. Here's what my theory is. Here's what we're looking at. Here's what we're thinking. And I've been teaching it this way for a couple of years now. So when you first came in, I was like, I'm sorry, I usually have my little clicker and we do the whole projector things. When I'm doing this with patients, I usually do this with a marker and a dry erase board. So I'm like, I'm going to present with a marker and a dry erase board today. But if I lose you or I need to go back and answer any questions, just slow me down. So a lot of people are like, well, Alaina, how are you getting to where you're talking about this? That gives you a little bit of background how I've been studying this. And it's not as quick and easy as we'd like to think it is. Oh. Things the staff needs me to order this week. I should probably hold on to that. All right, any questions so far? We haven't gotten to the fun stuff yet. All right, so let's talk about how a muscle works and where this cramp actually comes from. Because we have this idea that muscle cramps are a muscle issue. It makes sense, right? My muscle is cramping. It must be a problem with the muscle. Well, what happens, there we go. I like lots of colors. So when we have a muscle, all right, have you all seen a picture of a muscle before? All right, so we have this muscle. In the middle is the muscly part. That's the part of the chicken you eat. On the ends, we have these tendons. That's the gristly part. We don't really eat on the tendons so much. And I don't know why everyone always connects with the part you eat and the part you don't, but that sounds terrible when we're talking about humans, doesn't it? So what happens is you have all of these little fibers inside of the muscle, and when a muscle contracts, each of those fibers kind of ratchets to each other to shorten or to lengthen, okay? That process, the muscle is not smart. Muscles are morons, okay? The muscle only does what the nerves will tell it to do. So, what happens, this nerve comes out to the muscle and says, hey, here's what you need to be doing. Now, muscles do have a mind of their own in the sense that if you don't tell them to chill out, what are they going to do? They're going to lock up. How many of you have ever seen someone who had a stroke and their arm was like curled right up? That's because that part of the brain is not actively telling the muscle to relax. Does that make sense? So that's not necessarily the cramping part, but we do know that those muscles will have a tendency to start to ratchet down a little bit depending on what's going on, depending on the information that the nerve is telling it to do. So sometimes the nerve will say, hey, muscle, relax. Sometimes the nerve will say, oh, there's danger, muscle be ready. It's kind of on that brink of ready to do something. Sometimes the nerve will say, muscle, you need to contract. Now, let me reset. All right, so what happens with our happy little person here, there's a brain. And the brain is what sends the message down the spinal cord, out the nerves, down to the muscle to tell it what to do. So if your brain tells your muscle to kick 10 pounds, all right, and somewhere along this path, as the nerve comes down the spinal cord, out, down to the leg, and then down to that muscle, let's say you have a back problem, such as a bulging disc or some stenosis, right here. That message that your brain sent down the spinal cord, out through the back, down to the leg, your brain may be saying kick 10 pounds, but if there's a traffic jam right here, you may be only getting part of the message, and the message may be kick 2 pounds. Does that make sense? So when you have someone who has any kind of problem in the nerve or the spine, there are times when you get a little bit of weakness in the legs. And that's not because the muscles by themselves are weak, it's because the brain is not getting the full message through. How many of you ever notice it's like, if your leg falls asleep a little bit, it's like you just don't have control over it? Or maybe if your back is hurting, your legs might feel a little wobbly, like they're not going to hold you up. Some people might have experienced that before. So this is important to know because this is the path how information gets down to that muscle. And anything that disrupts this path, whether it's a disruption like a traffic jam, or if it's a slight irritation to the nerve, and there's lots of things that can irritate the nerve, that can affect this as well.
Ooh, then that makes it way more serious.
I won't go with serious because I don't want anyone to stress, but it does make it a little more complicated because so much of the time when people have been looking into muscular cramping, you know where they look? Right here. They don't even look at the tendon, they don't look at the nerve, they don't look at the back, they don't look at the spinal cord, they don't look at the brain. Okay? Just let that sink in for a moment. And what do we tend to think? I have a pain right here, the problem must be right here, right? And that's how we grew up. Oh, I have a paper cut. It hurts where the paper cut is. The problem is where it hurts. When it comes to there being involvement of nerves, things are a little bit different. How many of you have ever had a pinched nerve before? Some people. How many of you ever hit your funny bone before and you feel it bzzz all the way out into your fingertips? You know your fingertips are okay. It's where you hit the nerve at your elbow. So just because you feel a symptom in one place doesn't mean it might not be coming from another if the nerve is involved. Kind of the same thing, someone having a heart attack, they may feel the pain in their arm as opposed to in their chest. It's called referred or radicular pain. So if you hear someone say radicular pain, I worked with an Australian guy. He would say, you got some ridiculous symptoms. And it's like, not ridiculous. They're not ridiculous. Radicular, meaning it's radiating from somewhere else. So if you hear those terms, then don't be surprised. No one's calling you ridiculous. It just sounds like that if they have the funky accent sometimes. All right, so here's a few things I want you to be thinking about. Now, let's talk about what makes this nerve happy and doesn't. Because really what this is going to come down to is what's going on with the nerve and is it sending the right messages to the muscle? Because the muscle can cramp on its own. Usually that's going to have to do with a high level of activity, like maybe I'm walking and I'm a little dehydrated. Maybe I'm running and my electrolytes are off. That is a different, even though it's a similar type of situation, that's not what we're talking about here. Most of the time what we're talking about here are people who, they feel like they can move around okay during the daytime, and then at nighttime is when like you get comfortable and you feel like, oh, I'm finally getting to sleep. And then like 45 minutes to an hour and a half later, bam, you get hit with these leg cramps. So let's talk about those.
Are you going to tell us why it's at night?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Let's talk about things that make the nerve happy. Because, you know, we're all concerned about the well-being of our nerves, right? So a nerve, let's think about just like a regular person. What are the things you need just to survive?
Water.
Yep. Water. You need nutrition, like food, which for us we need food. Nutrition for nerves is a little bit different. Now I know we all hear sugar is bad. In your body, sugar is called glucose, and it is a key part of how your body functions. But just like the rest of us, if we get too much of it, it can create a problem as well. So you want to make sure that your blood sugar is in a good range so you have enough to use, but not so much you're getting other diabetic complications. All right, so the nerve needs water, It needs nutrition in the form of sugar. It needs electrolytes. And what happens is electrolytes are how the nerve actually works to be able to send that little electric signal. Electrolytes are not electric, by the way. I had someone ask me that one time. When we're talking about electrolytes, this is why your doctor might put you on some Gatorade or a supplement such as salt. We don't think that salt actually helps the nerve to be able to function. We've got magnesium, potassium, calcium is actually a big one. So vitamins and electrolytes, these are things that help the nerve actually function. So if you don't have these, you may hear the doctor talk about we have to be careful about certain types of supplements, especially calcium and potassium. When we worry about these affecting the heart, what we're really worried about is the electrical system of the heart. Does that make sense? So the same electrical system that sends messages from your brain down the spinal cord out, it's comprised of nerves. Well, the same thing with your heart. Your heartbeat is driven by those nerves that send a signal to tell the heart to contract, 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 contract. We want that to keep happening. By the way, if anyone's questioning if you want that to keep happening, we do want the heart to keep beating. So the heart is another muscle. It doesn't go through leg cramps the same way the rest of our body does. But these are some of the things that nerve needs to be happy. Another thing the nerve needs to be happy is movement. All right? So when we look at, we've got the brain. That's a real pretty brain, I know. I told you I didn't go to art school. We've got the spinal cord, and we've got the little nerve that comes off the spinal cord that goes out to the muscle. This nerve is actually kind of like a really fine little tube. And it's one nerve that goes all the way out to the muscle. It's not like nerve to nerve to nerve to nerve. We've got that message going through one long nerve, okay? Imagine a really narrow hallway. And you've got some people that need to come in and some people that need to go out. The inside of this nerve, it has something in it called axoplasm. I'm not making that up. That wasn't from Ghostbusters, I promise. But what axoplasm is this fluid inside of the nerve that helps to transport nutrition in and waste products out. All right? So the nerve itself, that little tube, the nerve itself needs to be healthy. That's going to be involved with the things that go on inside of the nerve. For the nerve to function, like sending a little electrical signal, that actually happens on the outside of the nerve. It kind of just bounces around until it sends a message to the muscle. So the function of the nerve to send the message happens on the outside of the nerve, and the fluid and nutrition and just the general well-being of the nerve happens on the outside, but also on the inside of it. And the reason I mention this axoplasm stuff is it's kind of gooey. Imagine the same people trying to get in and out of a hallway, but trying to do it through Jell-O. So what helps is if the Jell-O is kind of moving in the directions that we need to be able to go, it helps to kind of push things along. So in order for your nerves to get that goo on the inside to move, you have to move. So holding still means that the goo inside of the nerve is probably holding still too. But your nerves are set up kind of like Chinese finger traps. Have you seen one of those where you pull your fingers apart and they kind of get stuck? So what happens with those little Chinese finger traps, they're a certain diameter, and as you pull them apart, they get narrow, and then that's as far as they go. So nerves don't really stretch, but they do have an inherent amount of movement. So as you move, and the best way to do this for the nerves in the legs is to do this. As you walk, movement actually helps create this little pumping action in the nerve that helps to move some of that fluid through, to help to nourish the nerve. So if you have all these great ingredients right here, but but you're not distributing them throughout the nerve still isn't very happy, is it? It's like giving someone a feast of food, but not giving them a fork to actually eat it with. So we want to make sure that the entire nerve is getting the nourishment, electrolytes, and water that it needs. How are we doing so far?
Would you go back to
Uh-huh.
the little bumblies on the nerve? The
Yep.
inside is the axoplasm.
Uh-huh.
What did you say the purple lines were again?
So this is the electrical current. It just kind of
the
skips
current.
along the
Okay.
outside.
Okay.
So the function of the nerve to send that message out to where your brain sends the message to the muscle, if it were to take and have to go through all the inside stuff, it would take too long to get there.
Okay.
So the electrical system of the body, it actually skips along the outside of the nerve. It's a much faster system.
Okay.
You have these nice little clumps of things called myelin along the nerve that help facilitate that little jumping of the nerve, of the electrical current. But it's an efficiency thing.
Okay.
It's much faster to skip on the outside than
Okay.
plow through the inside.
So the sciatica is a nerve, correct?
You know what? We're definitely going to talk about that. Let me add that in.
We have to.
Sciatica. And the other question was why at night? Just to make sure we cover this.
Can you also talk about what exactly is sciatica?
That's what we're going to talk about.
Okay.
Mhm. Yep. All right. But what I found is if you don't understand the basics of what we're looking at, then the other stuff doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So how do we feel with this so far? There's no quiz at the end. Okay, just in case anyone was worried. Now, so like I said, for the nutrients and for the the waste to go out and the good stuff to come in, we have to have good flow in that axoplasm. And the way we get that is to create that little pumping action through movement. All right? So for those people who tend to be more sedentary, they're not getting a lot of pumping of that, are they? Now, when you go to bed, how much movement are you doing? Yeah, you basically, you go into this state of almost dream-induced paralysis type of deal where you're not really moving. So during the day, where you might have a little nerve irritation, but you keep moving it, which keeps those nutrients, okay, yeah, it's a little inflamed, but we'll just move that on out of here, you do okay. And then at night, you hold still. And everything just kind of stops. That's when the nerve, if it's not getting the nutrients, it's not going to feel so good, is it? If you weren't getting oxygen, what would you do?
Yeah.
You'd freak out, right?
Yeah.
What do you think that nerve does when it's not getting enough nutrients, oxygen, that sort of thing? I'll add oxygen to the list.
So then do we assume then that whatever activity we're doing during the day is not enough to keep our nerves happy?
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
But that's an excellent question because there's also a line where if you're doing activity that bothers the nerve, yeah. So let's say you do yard work for a day, and a lot of people can trace this back. I have some people who will keep a leg cramp journal, like what they did during the 48 hours before, and what their leg cramps were like. Long car rides. If I'm in a car like this, not good position for my back, the nerve is on a stretch, I'm not moving hours at a time, a lot of times they'll get that cramp during the daytime, but if they're in that position, or that putting the nerve in a compromised position for a long enough amount of time, but then you're like, oh, I just got to get up and move. You have that feeling like I have got to move. And you get up and you move and you walk around, but is that enough to truly counteract all of the, not trauma, but everything you just did to that nerve in the previous 6 hours of driving? Probably not. You're probably going to have a rough night. And you've probably noticed when I do things that are tough on my back or that might be tough on a nerve such as driving, that night tends to be kind of tough. I mean, you've mentioned noticing some of that. So just a couple of things to be thinking about there. All right, so does it make sense that we need the basic building blocks for the nerve to be healthy and happy? Does it make sense that we need movement for the nerve to be healthy and happy? All right, so let's get into the actual night cramps. Ta-da! How many of you have ever seen a little chunk of spine before? All right. This is Stumpy. He's our clinic model. This is a little piece of spine from right down here. And what happens, I want you to notice, if I take away these blocks of the spine, the bones of the vertebra, if I take one of those off, can you see that spinal cord right there in the middle? And coming off the spinal cord is what? The nerve that goes down the leg and tells the body what to do. All right? Now, do you remember how we talked about if there's some type of traffic jam along the way, that there can be a problem? There's lots of different ways to aggravate this nerve. One, you take some scissors and just cut it. I really hope that's not the case with anyone. That's called paralysis. If the nerve is completely severed, it's not working at all, right? Now, there's other ways to bother the nerve. So if you look, aside from this bone here, there's also a disc between the bones. That disc, if it's bulging out the back, guess what it can do? It can bump into the nerve and aggravate it. Now, here's another key. If you do something that bothers the disc, but you don't put it to the point where it's actually bumping into the nerve, but maybe that disc has some micro tears in it or has a little bit of irritation, that can create something called inflammation. Now, inflammation includes swelling. It includes some inflammatory components that are highly irritating to nerves, and that fluid. It includes some pain, and those are things we generally aren't a fan of. But what we want to be mindful of is if we have a little bit of that inflammation and swelling, that can create pressure and annoyance to the nerve. Now, I know this sounds weird. Do you have any siblings, Lynn? Mm-hmm. Did they ever come up to you and be like, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you? And it's like, but you sure are annoying me, right?
Yeah.
So there's this line, and a lot of times people have x-rays and MRIs, and it may not show a very clear, oh, this is what's happening. But anything that creates less of an ideal environment is going to make for what? A less happy nerve. Now, as we age, first of all, who said maturity for one of them? Was it Anne? Yes. Yes, there's Anne. I was like, let me make sure. Age is not a diagnosis. So if anyone tells you that you have a problem, it's, oh, well, you're getting older. Age is only the number on your driver's license. The rest of it has to do with how you treat and take care of your body. So regardless of what the number on your driver's license is, you can always do a better or worse job of caring for the one vessel that we get. And we can replace some joints, but we can't replace the whole thing. We got to take advantage of caring for the one we've got. But what does happen as we age, those discs in between, when we're young, they're nice and plump. And as we age, they kind of flatten down, all right? As they flatten down, if that disc wasn't there, what do you think is going to happen to the space that is available for the nerve? It's going to, as the disc flattens down, you close the space around the nerve. That is called stenosis. It's actually a very normal part of aging, but it happens so slowly that it shouldn't bother you. If you add stenosis to an injury or an overstressing of tissues, it can create a problem. But when you have less space around the nerve, how happy do you think that nerve is? It doesn't have as much room to move. It doesn't have as much room to absorb a little bit of swelling or not. Do you think it's a happy nerve? So the other thing that nerves need is space. They do not like getting squashed. Now, let's go back to that sciatica for a moment. Let me introduce you to my little friend. This is Pete. He was named Pete by a 4-year-old the week that we opened, and, well, it stuck. But this is looking at Pete from the back. Now, if you look at this same little chunk of spine, do you see how each of those little segments of the spine has a nerve that comes out from it? The sciatic nerve is...
Move that left or right a little bit, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay. So what happens is there's a nerve that comes out of each of those segments. The lower 4 nerves there are going to come together, and they're going to come out of this little opening right here. This opening is called the sciatic notch. So if there's a nerve coming through it, what do you think they're going to call it? The sciatic nerve. But in reality, it's not a nerve. It is a group of nerves that are carpooling together down the leg until they get the knee, and then they start splitting off and going their separate ways. So whenever someone says you have sciatica, that's a fancy way of saying pain in the area of the sciatic nerve, which means pain in the butt and leg. If I came to you and I said, Doc, I got this pain right in here. I've got it. You have knee pain. Well, no kidding. I could have told you I had knee pain. The term sciatica just means, that's just describing where the pain is. Now, do you remember I said there are several nerves that come together? Any one of those nerves being irritated can lead to pain in the sciatic distribution. Where it comes out, there's a little muscle that crosses here. Any irritation of that muscle where it tries to guard and help can bother that nerve and lead to pain in the sciatic distribution. If you fall on a rock and land square in the middle of your butt cheek, landing right on that nerve, that can create pain there. But what we have to do is look at what are all the different things that can cause problems to any one of those nerves that are part of the carpool lane. It could be a disc. It could be not having good muscular control in your spine. It could be stenosis. It could be any number of things. And guess what? The way that you treat one of those problems is exactly the opposite of the way you treat the other. So this idea that I'm going to treat sciatica with, how many people say, oh, I tried this and it worked, and someone else tries it and it didn't? Just because they have symptoms in the same area does not mean it came from the same source. So you have to look at what the source of the problem is in order to appropriately treat it.
So can you have pain, like while I'm sitting here, my leg is thumping right in here.
Stand up.
Okay. Is that going to help it?
How about everyone stand up? We've been sitting for more than 15 minutes.
Okay.
So the worst thing you can do for a spine is sit for too long
Okay.
and not be getting an adequate amount of movement. Now you can sit back down.
Okay.
Wasn't that so exciting?
That was great.
It's not about what you do when you stand up as much as it is that you break up how long you've been sitting for. Okay, it's the prolonged sitting that puts some stress on the back. I'll tell you, people always ask me, what do you think of lazy boy chairs? I'll tell you exactly what I think of lazy boy chairs. Job security, because as long as there's lazy boy chairs, there's going to be people who are not moving enough to take care of these tissues that will end up needing our care. Now, don't get me wrong, we've got plenty of people who get hurt on their own. We don't need to make any more people getting hurt. But just breaking up your sitting will help out with that.
Okay.
Let me have you go ahead and finish your question.
But then I'm saying, if I'm sitting here and I've been being treated, my pain is down here, but it's not back here.
Yeah.
Does that still mean that it could be the side?
It can be.
Okay.
And what's interesting, this is why I bring up sciatica, because that sciatic nerve that comes out of this little notch all the way down the leg, nerves are the most sensitive part of your body. And your body will do some interesting things to try and protect that nerve. So if I have a problem in my back that's bothering that sciatic nerve down the leg, these muscles, especially the inner thigh and the inner calf, will actually get a little tighter to try and protect the nerve. Okay? And how many people say, oh, I have tight hamstrings, I need to stretch them out. And then you try to stretch out a muscle, and that muscle says, no, 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 no. I am trying to help you here, and it gets tighter to try to protect you, and you're trying to stretch it, and it's trying to tighten. And I have some people who will actually create muscle tears on their own trying to stretch this out. So trying to stretch out a tight muscle, guess what? You have to know why it's tight to begin with. If it's just tight because you sit too much, that's one thing. But if it's trying to protect that nerve, then you trying to stretch it out is actually counterproductive.
Well, aren't some people just naturally not flexible? That's what I always attributed my tightness to be. I'm just not flexible.
And a lot of people will say that. Flexibility has a lot more to do with how you treat your body, but there is a spectrum. There's stiff old grandpa who's always been, never really been flexible. And then there's Simone Biles and her crazy Olympic flips and the Cirque du Soleil people, there is a natural spread of people being more or less flexible, but your body accommodates to that very well as you develop. So what we're looking at more is, what are your daily patterns that are creating some of that? Or what are the ways your body's trying to protect itself? So
are you
yes.
saying you shouldn't stretch the back of your leg, the calf?
Stretching is okay, but statistically, they've done a lot of research on, they used to say, does physical therapy help leg cramps? This was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And they would say, okay, all these people with leg cramps, we're going to give them a program, and they're going to strengthen and stretch these muscles. Guess what? What are they looking at? They're looking right in the muscle. They're not accounting for the nerve. So they actually found that a program of stretching does not significantly change your night cramps. Now, is stretching probably good for you? Oh yeah. Does it feel good? Yes. Does it make it a little bit easier for you to have more mobility if you do need to stretch out after having a cramp? Absolutely. I'm not saying don't stretch. What I am saying is you can spend your time, if you're in a sinking boat, you can spend your time bailing water, or you can actually plug the hole. I suggest we find the problem and plug the hole and look at what are the things that are bothering the nerve. It's a little bit different approach, but does it make sense so far? So does that make sense about the sciatica? How it's not just one nerve, but it's several nerves, and there's multiple different things that can cause it? Okay. Other questions so far?
So
Yes.
a lot of times, like when I very first wake up,
Mhm.
I'm without consciously thinking about it, you know, how you just kind of wake up and you stretch.
And then it
And
catches
that'll
you?
Kick off a cramp. Is that because it's trying to protect what you were just saying, you know, like?
Some of the time it is, and some of the time it's been building for a couple of hours and you finally gave it that little threshold to push it over the cramp, which we're about to talk about that threshold now.
Alaina, can I
Yeah.
just interject
Uh,
one more thing?
Sure.
Does restless leg syndrome have anything to do with anything here?
I strongly believe it does.
Oh, okay.
There's not a lot of research along this line yet. So some of the things we're talking about are not all the way out as far as being able to just easily look it up. These are things, when you look at research, everyone wants to say, here's a problem, here's one fix, it's a pill, or it's this supplement, or it's this one thing, does that fix it? Well, what we're about to learn is it might not be just one thing. And it very likely is not the same thing for everybody. So, ta-da. And I will leave this up here because this is the important stuff. How do we keep a happy nerve? All right. I'm about to tell you the worst analogy I could possibly come up with. Nerves. I want you to think of a nerve like someone who's getting strangled. Again, please don't try this at home. But if you imagine somebody, like they're a happy little nerve, and then all of a sudden someone comes and chokes them. What's the first thing they do? They freak out, right? And then they're losing oxygen, they start to lose their fight, and then they kind of pass out. They're not dead yet, but they're passed out. And if you keep strangling them, they're going to die, right? Nerves, if you aggravate them, their first instinct is this, to kind of fight back. When a nerve sends off those signals, it forces the muscle to move, and then they get some of that movement they so desperately need. Happy nerves, if they're not happy, they will find a way. Nerves can't give themselves water. They can't give themselves sugar or electrolytes. They can force you to get up and move. So if that's their one tool, does that make sense so far? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the things that'll happen. So this is not a good marker. Let me get a different one. This is the cramp threshold. All right, and down here is normal. All right, so let's say, by the way, another way that helps your nerves be happy is getting adequate sleep.
Well, hello.
I know. That's not high up on our list, but it is something I want you to think about. So if you have a problem with the nerve, are you getting adequate sleep?
No.
Probably not. But these are and there's lots of other things that go into the nerve being happy, but these are the main 5 things that we want you aware of. So let's say you worked all day in the yard and you put a little stress on your back. All right? When you get inflammation around the nerves and the spine, you get that swelling. When you move and walk, it helps to pump that swelling out. So as you're moving and walking throughout the day, it's not that bad. Then what happens when you go to sleep at night? You hold still. What do you think that swelling does? Builds, 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 builds. And then you might wake up in the morning with more stiffness and pain, but you went to bed okay. That's a process of inflammation. What do you think inflammation is going to do to that nerve? Is it going to make it happy or mad? It's going to irritate it. So even though it's not directly creating, like it's not hitting the nerve, it's aggravating the nerve. So if that nerve is sitting in a bath of acid and it's becoming unhappy, that's one of the things that can cause the nerve to be aggravated and set off that system that can create a leg cramp. So, stress on the back. Yard work is a good way to do this. Or here's what else happens is people say, you know what, I'm having a good day. What am I going to do? Clean the whole house. Or I'm going to empty the whole garage. They're going to do something big. So be mindful. If you're having a good day, enjoy it. Yeah, get some things done, but don't try to do it all in one day. That's when people say, you know what, I had a good day, I got everything done, but the next 2 nights I was dying. Not dying, but in a lot of pain. Okay? Let's say that while you were working in the yard, you forgot to drink enough water. Let's say that instead of eating a nice nutritious meal, you went to McDonald's. Are you able to see this back there? I'm sorry. Okay. Let's say that after you got done working in the yard.
The box up there is a question.
That what?
That box that you're building right there, McDonald's, water, that sort of thing. Can alcohol contribute to?
Alcohol is going to contribute to dehydration.
Okay.
So indirectly, yes. Now let's say that you have that alcohol while you decide you're going to sit down and watch Netflix or a football game.
I won't pick on football games.
European football. Well, the reason I picked those 2 things is most other programming has commercials that you can get up regularly for, and it's not an event that's a couple of hours long. So a lot of people will get into a movie or something where they get on the couch and they stay there. So what is this affecting? You're getting less movement. All right? Oh. This has to do with the nutrition. So let's say you're short on vitamins and electrolytes because your nutrition consists of McDonald's. That's not to dig on McDonald's, but you know what I'm talking about there. Mm-hmm. All right. And then let's say, so we've got the stress on the back. That can create some inflammation. We've got we haven't been drinking enough water. You haven't been doing enough movement, nutrition. And then let's say you turn wrong. Like, oh, I'm getting up from the chair, or I try to roll over in bed and it puts a little twist on my spine or a stretch on the nerve. This is where maybe you just get up and stretch a little bit. You have that one little thing, that one little movement turns into put me over the threshold.
It's usually when you put your leg out of the bed to get out that it hits.
I have everyone kind of has that little different range. Some people it wakes them from a dead asleep. Some people it's when they first start to move in the morning, they get them from there. Other people they start to move and it's not until they try to sit up on the side of the bed that puts especially if they try to get up like this. Maybe they're sleeping on the bed and they go like that to sit up, or something that might put a little stress on the spine. You might have that one little motion that seems to put you over that threshold, okay? Now, nerves, over time, they don't respond better. They actually become more sensitive to this the more often that they're having problems. And what happens is they become more sensitive is this cramp threshold will drop down to say around here. That threshold will lower the more chronically you have these problems, that threshold will drop down. That makes it harder to manage because where before when the threshold was up here, maybe you could get away with just drinking more water and that would drop everything down. Or maybe you could get away with taking a vitamin supplement and that would help drop that down. Does that make sense? So the more sensitive the nerve is to these factors, meaning the longer you've been doing this to the nerves, the easier it is to set this off. Now, do you remember how we just stood up and sat back down? Mm-hmm. That's how you counteract that TV couch situation. Just stand up every time a commercial break should come on. Movement. Even better is if you go for a walk. But at a minimum, just stand up and sit back down. It's the prolonged sitting that really sets in there. Look at what's going in your mouth. Can you pronounce what you're eating? And all the ingredients in it. Do you know what's in it? If that's the case, is anyone ever going to eat a hot dog again? But those are things that we can, so when we have somebody who say has a bad back, which I can give a whole nother talk on the phrase bad back, one that if you have some issues where if you sit too long, stand too long, do anything too long, you always feel like that needs to move, or people who start to get pain in their butt, legs, or back if they've been sitting too long. As we get older, for a lot of people, it's if they're standing too long or if they're walking too long. So addressing what is going on at the back is another key thing to reduce those. So the more components you have that bother the 5 keys to a happy nerve, the easier it is for you to get cramps. For some people, and you can, if your activity drives your leg cramps. So people tell me, if I do something that's a lot of work on my hips and back, I get leg cramps the next night and day. That's a good sign. You probably need to get a little bit of help on addressing the nerves in the back. If you notice, hey, when I am eating well, I have less cramps. If I'm drinking enough water, I have less cramps. This is a good reason to keep a little journal. And what I would do is write down in your journal, how much water did I get? How was my nutrition? Am I getting enough electrolytes in my diet? And this will come from fresh fruits and vegetables as much as anything, better so than supplements. Am I getting enough movement through my day, or am I more sedentary? Now the part about space and movement, those are the two where physical therapy comes into play. I have a lot of people where they need me to get in just to that one nerve and just stretch it out so that there's enough ability for you to have enough space. Because over time, if you've just been getting tight and stiff, just moving and stretching probably won't get that without very specific care. So that's something, if you have questions about, I'm happy to answer questions there as well. A couple of other things that have come out lately, zinc. They've talked about magnesium as a supplement. Potassium you do have to be careful about because of heart issues. And eating more bananas is not always the key to getting your cramps down. For those of you who've tried it and wondered why didn't this work, having a good rounded diet should take care of most of that. But there is some information coming out about zinc being helpful there. But again, it's just one component in things that help the nerve be happy. Your general health is going to dictate how happy those nerves are. If you're diabetic, those nerves are probably not getting enough blood flow, and how do you think they feel? Are they getting enough water and nutrition? you may be getting enough water and nutrition, but if you're diabetic or you have blood flow issues, those nerves might not be getting it. Does that make sense? So what questions do you all have so far for me? You ready for some strategies? That's what we're here for, right? Like, how do I start working on this? So 1, look at your daily intake. Are you getting enough of the 5 things that are going to make the nerve happy? Other things, things that I've found that help with making the nerve happy, besides these, that we use in the clinic. Some of you might have noticed, and on your way out, when you come out through the back, you'll see there's this big black plate. It's a vibration plate. Vibration, when your nerves are starting to die off or be sick or not work well, vibration and light touch are the first things that you lose. So a lot of times, using vibration can help. I have some people who will use vibration for about 10 minutes before they go to bed. Now, those, around Mother's Day, they always come out, those little foot baths. Do you know what I'm talking about? You put your feet in them, they vibrate, they heat up. Oh, I'm getting my feet soaked. But then you have to clean it up and do all the other stuff. You don't even have to fill it up. Just take one of those, turn on the vibration feature, and just rest your feet in it for 8 to 10 minutes before you go to bed. Some people, this little baby was $4.55 at Walmart. I tell people just...
Using that all over our legs?
I have some people, I'm like, just put it under your foot.
Now, how does that help?
For vibration, it actually helps promote that exoplasmic flow we were talking about. And it's a little bit of forced use, where vibration is one of the senses that you lose first. If you force vibration through it, and you're paying attention, like, oh, that is vibration, it helps recover a little bit of that. We use vibration a lot with people with neuropathy because it helps with getting that flow through the nerve and getting the nutrition in and the waste products out. So it's another little key that we'll use to make for a happy nerve. I have a lot of people, when I have people come in with this, we'll do a balance test on them. Even if it's as simple as 1 foot. How long can you stand on 1 foot? Oh, you can only stand for 7 seconds. We put them on a chair, put their feet on vibration for 6 minutes, test it again. Most of the time it nearly doubles. And that's not because you suddenly have good balance, it's because we kind of did a little bit of waking up of the nerve to do a better job of doing its job. So we say, wake up the nerve with some vibration. It sounds weird because you're about to go to sleep, right? But I have a lot of people who can use vibration before they go to bed, and they can get an extra few hours before they get night cramps.
For clarity again, vibration through the feet.
Vibration through the feet. Now, you can put it on the other areas as well, but the feet are the most distant part of that nerve. So if the nerve is getting it at the feet, it's getting it the whole way up. So through the feet helps. So if you have, I'm not saying you have to go out and buy one of those big fancy vibration plates. You don't have to do like full body vibration. If you do have something that vibrates, sit down and put just your feet on it. I don't want anyone calling me like, Alaina, I stood on this crazy vibration plate and it threw me off. And yeah, it's just letting your feet rest on it and get the sensation. So vibration is one of the things that you can use for that. Oh, I'm making a mess here, aren't I? I used to be able to squat down better than that a couple months ago.
Wait till a few more months.
Yeah, it's coming. All right, so we talked about vibration. Now, do you remember how we talked about water making the nerves happy? I can't tell you how many people say, I'm not going to drink more water before I go to bed because what am I going to have to do? Get up and go pee all night. Guess what? If you have to get up and go pee, you're moving. Water, movement, nerve is happy. If you have to pee in the middle of the night, that's actually okay. It means your kidneys are working. By the way, if your kidneys stop working, you got a big problem. So making sure that you're getting an adequate amount of water. Now, I'm not suggesting you eat a meal before you go to bed, but if you have other risk factors or if your doctor's mentioned your blood sugar is an issue, keeping your blood sugar in a good, safe range, not too low, because again, we don't want it to feel like it's starving, but not too high where you're starting to affect your body processes by having high blood sugar. Keeping your blood sugar in a safe, healthy range is a very good thing to keep an eye on as far as that sugar side of things. I have some people who will bottom out at night. And they do need to get a little snack before they go to bed. Everyone's a little bit different there. So if you have concerns about that, make sure when you go for your yearly checkup that you're talking to your doctor about your blood sugar. And it may be something they just have you do one of those finger stick things throughout the day for a week and just kind of see what does it do throughout the day. Are you waking up with it way too low? Oops. Or is it too high? That sort of thing. So vibration, water. If you do a supplement, do it a couple of hours before you go to bed. Like I'm talking at least 2 hours before you go to bed. A lot of people will take something like, oh, I'm doing some tonic water, or I'm taking this magnesium supplement, or I'm doing these things. You need time for it to get into your system and through your system before you stop moving for the day. So supplements, 2 hours before bed.
And so what supplements are you suggesting? Because I'm already on the magnesium, but does that take a while to start?
You should notice differences within about 2 weeks if it's going to be an issue.
Okay.
So there's some doctors that will actually do a full blood panel and check and see what are your different levels of these different types of things. Sometimes they do just the general panel. Sometimes you've got to go to someone called a functional medicine doctor if you really want to get a full panel. And sometimes that's covered by insurance, sometimes it's not. But having that information can help you decide, like, okay, what are some things I might need to add in? But what I let people know is start with, before you worry about the supplements, I'll tell you, if you type online, how to treat leg cramps, then Facebook and everyone else and their mother is going to send you an ad that here is the supplement for you. This one has everything. This one will change your life. Right? It's like what used to be infomercials. Now they're all in your inbox and everywhere. Before you start with this, I would start with the other ones, especially movement and water.
Does water have to be just water? Can it be iced tea? Can it be, you know?
Tea and coffee have a mild diuretic effect, meaning they make you pee a little more. So ideally, you can have a tea. Getting the water in is the most important. Ideally, the closer you are to water without other things in it, definitely not a soda.
Right.
Sodas have something in them called phosphoric acid. That will do a number on you. If you have any concerns about osteoporosis, phosphoric acid is not your friend. It actually will pull calcium from your body. And again, calcium is one of those nutrients you need for that nerve to function effectively. Yes?
The cola water
Uh-huh.
does not have any taste to it, which is good. It
Mhm.
tastes just like water. But
It's my
supposed to
favorite
have
water.
the electrolytes
And,
in it.
well, what we look at with core water, I believe it's an alkaline water. So you'll see different types of water. And this wasn't something we're going to go over a whole lot of today, but we do look at systemic inflammation as something that can bother nerves and blood vessels. So if you are having a more acidic type of diet and lifestyle, if you're someone who tends to breathe through your mouth, for instance, that changes your blood chemistry. These are things we actually go over quite a bit in our fibromyalgia talk, because that has a lot to do with a lot of those aches and pains that people get. But again, can you pronounce everything that's going in your body? So whether it's water or it's fancy water, you want to make sure that you're at least getting the water in. But there are some, if you want to chat afterwards, if you have questions about some of the other things, alkaline water tends to taste, I think it tastes better personally, but that does help with some of the systemic inflammation things that we tend to suffer from as a first world problem, because we have a lot of, I don't have McDonald's up here anymore, but we have a lot of nutritional deficits where we're getting a lot of food, but we're not necessarily getting a lot of nutrition from it. Those are a few things that we definitely want to consider, but the easiest way is don't put anything in your mouth that you can't pronounce or that you can't repeat if you weren't reading the label.
What did you think about the taurine suggestion that I got?
The taurine suggestion, taurine is one of the amino acids. I really couldn't say with a whole lot of certainty. I haven't read up a whole lot on it. Putting something in your body that you're already that you should already be getting as part of your 23 amino acids. I mean, I don't have any. The worst case is you end up with extra protein in your urine. So we want to that's something we want to be cautious about.
Yeah, okay.
But we're not
Just
trying to
thinking
over protein you,
Yeah.
but again, there's a lot of things that your body can use naturally that you can get in your diet and with a healthy, fit lifestyle. We have this idea that we need a pill for everything. Whereas if we look at the basics first, start with the basics. If you're getting the basics in and that's all looking good, then we start looking at supplementation of different supplements, different additives, different things in your diet. Unless you just like spending money and getting really expensive toilet water. And I do see that happen a lot where if you're not, here's the thing, if you have all these electrolytes in your system, but you're not getting enough movement to distribute that throughout the nerve, again, expensive toilet water. Oh, I had one more thing to show you. And this little move is for helping with that exoplasmic flow. It's a specific movement to get the nerves to do their job. So, I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it. One is while you're sitting, so we can practice it here. And the other way is while you're lying down. It's called a nerve glide. Now, to be clear, it's a glide, like we're flossing it. It is not a stretch. Nerves do not really like getting stretched, except in a few very specific cases, in which case a PT should be doing it for you because you don't want to be trying to stretch your own nerves without some very clear guidelines there. So the first one I'm going to show you, if you imagine that I have a piece of floss that attaches from my brain down my back, down my butt cheek, down the back of my leg to underneath my heel to the bottom of my middle toe. Does that make sense? If, I'm going to do this from the side, if I kick my leg out this way, do you see how that's going to stretch and pull that floss down towards my toe? And if I also put my head down this way, what do you think that's going to do from the top? It's going to stretch it as well. So I'm going to be stretching it. We don't want to do that. So what we do with this for the sitting version,
Which is kind of how everybody's sitting now, especially when you're taking a car ride, looking at your phone.
I'm going to air five you.
To do.
Exactly, that's brilliant. So what we look at on this one,
No, would you repeat that because I could not hear?
so what she mentioned was that we just talked about if your foot is up like this, that's going to stretch the nerve down towards the foot. And if my head is down, that's going to stretch the nerve towards my head. What do I look like if I'm sitting in a car or on a cell phone? So when you're in these positions that the nerve doesn't like for long amounts of time, is the nerve happy? Not specifically, not especially. So what we're going to look at is if you're sitting in a chair, that's a toe, by the way. That's a very large toe. We're going to look at your nose and toes. We're going to do a little move here, but I want you to keep in mind that your nose and toes okay, make sure I'm saying the right thing. Nose and toes move together. So the way we do this move, and I'm going to go through it with you and then we'll do it again so you can write it down if you want to. But if you want to set your papers aside for a moment, what you're going to do is sit back in the chair a little bit. It's okay to slouch only for this little bit. We don't want you slouching all the time. And then what you're going to do, I want you to take your nose and toes and point them up towards the ceiling. And then nose and toes point down towards the floor. So you see how my toe points down like a ballerina? Nose and toes up, nose and toes down. Now you'll notice when you bring your toe up, if you're getting a lot of stretch in the back of your leg, then you're probably doing a little too much. You don't have to all the way straighten your leg if you feel a lot of stretch. All we're looking to do here, not to stretch, just to get that little glide in. And you can do this about 10 times. Now, let's say that you've already gone to bed and you're already comfortable. You don't want to get back up. I'm going to show you the way you can do this laying in bed. But does anyone have any questions? Nose and toes up to the ceiling, nose and toes down to the floor. How do you feel with that? You can do that a few times before you go to bed to get a little bit more motion and nutrition. So it's not unusual that I have people that will do, I'll be like, get some water in you, do 10 minutes, 6 to 10 minutes of vibration, and do 10 of your nerve glides before you go to bed, and see if you don't get more time before the leg cramps come on. Notice I'm not saying that's a fix. That's a short-term solution. The fixes are going to be managing those 5 things that keep the nerves happy. Okay, yes?
Do you do it with both legs?
I would. Yeah.
Separately or together?
Separately. That's an excellent question. Mostly because I don't want you to fall off your chair, but also it puts a little less stress on the spinal cord. All right. Any questions on that one? Nose and toes towards the ceiling, nose and toes towards the floor. Now here's the other one I was going to show you. If I'm already laying in bed, again, I do have shorts on, by the way. What I can do is bend one knee, and I'm going to take my leg, especially if you have one leg that tends to cramp more than the other, all right? I'm going to bring it up like a frog. Do you see how my knee is bent and my ankle is bent? I'm going to point it down like a ballerina. Now notice I'm pointing down, not towards the ceiling. We're not trying to be Rockettes here. So frog, ballerina, frog, ballerina, frog, ballerina. And I can do that 5 to 10 times on each leg. Now, if I do this with my legs straight and try to do one leg at a time, that's actually going to be tough on me. I want to have the other leg bent to take some stress off of the spine so that it's truly just the nerve doing that little bit. And I have some people, if they can't hold up their leg, they'll put their foot on a ball and just roll the ball back and forth. Okay? So those are a couple, ooh, stood up too fast. Those are a few things that you can be trying before you go to bed. Again, not fixes, but sometimes if you haven't gotten enough movement during the day, getting that very specific movement in the nerve, by moving in that way, it helps to create a little pumping action to help the nerve be a little bit happier before you go to bed. What other questions do you have for today? Yes?
What is your take on acupuncture and deep needling? I've had deep needling done. I've had acupuncture too for sciatica.
Mm-hmm.
And at first it worked and then it didn't. They tried deep needling on my leg for my massive cramps in my legs.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't done a whole lot, but I don't know. It seemed to help a little bit.
So I actually do something called dry needling.
Yes, that's what
Which
I
is
mean. That's
similar.
what I mean.
When I say similar, it's not the same as acupuncture. Acupuncture is to help with the flow of the qi in the body. That's very Eastern medicine. What I do, I put a needle into the muscle that I'm trying to affect. And either I turn it off or I turn it on using different techniques.
Right.
It's just a very direct treatment method. I've not found that the dry needling is going to do, if someone tends to cramp so much that they have residual tight bands in the muscle, dry needling will help with that part. Of everyone in the room talking so far, you mentioned about having it up in the groin and thigh. You would probably be someone who'd fall into that category that may benefit from that. For most people where it's just kind of down in the legs, get the nerves happy first and then clean up what's left. And where I come in is, one, educating on a lot of these things, helping make sure that you have adequate movement and space, and helping clean up some of those smaller things that go hand in hand with it.
Again, it's very short. Clarify what you mean by space.
Okay, so if we have, you all were able to see this one.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to come on back over here. So if we have this little piece of spine, this is a spine facing forwards, here's the back, here's the front. if I bend forward, do you see how that makes more space around the nerve? If I bend backwards, do you see how that closes the space around the nerve? If I were to take that disc out entirely and squash down, as if they had some stenosis or narrowing, that's less space around the nerve. Now, it's not just in the spine that this happens. Right where one of the nerves comes out right in your butt cheek, there's a muscle in there that if it gets tight, it can actually compress and reduce space around the nerve. There's a couple of interfaces along the nerve where it can get caught on things. So that's where we want to make sure that there's adequate movement and enough space for it to not be compressed. If you think of a garden hose, if you step on it, you're not going to get flow of water through there very well, are you? And a lot of times with the nerve, if you squash it a little bit, or if it's stretched and squashed, it's not getting adequate flow of that exoplasm through the nerve. Other questions?
One last thing.
Oh, you're fine.
Your term, exoplasm or axioplasm? What's the word?
Ta-da! It is exoplasm.
So,
So, in a regular cell, it has like a nucleus. It has some, what are those called? Ribosomes, and I haven't done this. The mitochondria. Those look like that. There's lots of different things inside the cells. It's all fancy. That's a regular cell, okay? And in the cell or cyto, the fluid that's on the inside is called cytoplasm. In a nerve, it kind of looks like this. It has these little dendrites on it, and it has one long part that comes out, and this part is called the axon. So the fluid that goes along there is called the axoplasm. Again, not an art major, but you can kind of get the point of it. So
If
go
you
ahead.
don't necessarily have cramping, but your legs just ache at night, is it still kind of basically the same thing that's the problem?
It could be. A lot of times what I see, especially in women, is we have hips and a waist and shoulders. And when we lay down, if you take an hourglass and put it on the side, imagine it's a soft hourglass, what's the middle going to do? It's going to sink down. And when you do that, you can actually compress the nerves on one side of your spine, and it can give you some aching into the legs. I have some people who can take just a rolled towel, just about the size of your forearm, and put it under the waist. Then they can sleep like on a side. Really, if it's not a specific leg cramp, and you're getting that at night, that would be worth an evaluation.
Okay.
Which brings me to my next topic. If you find that you're not sure how this works for you, or if you want an assessment of those nerves to see, are they moving? Do they have adequate movement? Do they have adequate space? Or is there something else going on that's making it hard for me to drop those blocks down so I'm not going over the threshold? If you have questions about that, that would be a good time to schedule an evaluation with a physical therapist. Everyone here at Marino Physiotherapy has gone on to do advanced level training such as fellowship, specialization in manual therapy techniques. We have, between the therapists that are here, I think we're up to 65 years of experience between us, between the four of us. So we've got a pretty good group here to help address those things. When it comes to leg cramps, I'm the person who does a lot with the leg cramps. When it comes to the treatment of it, once we know what the causes are, then any one of us can be treating those. But I would suggest that before you leave, you grab one of our cards on the way out, or just save our phone number in your phone. We have, you can always text our main phone number. So if you have a question on something, or you're like, hey, I just tripped on a root in the yard. Do I need to go to the emergency room? If you have questions along those lines, you can always shoot us a text message. If it's during the daytime, it goes to our receptionist. If it's in the evening or weekends, it'll go through to my cell phone. It's not an emergency line. If I'm hiking or sleeping, I'll get it when I wake up. But it does give you a little bit of an avenue if you have questions along the way. Or if something happens over the weekend, like, can you get me in first thing Monday morning? Like, send me a text message, and we can usually try to work that out. Did you all get your money's worth from today's? Good. I hope you got some. Oh, sure.
Quick question.
Uh-huh.
What I asked before, so the movement we're doing already, whatever we're doing, is gotta be increased, or just with the vibration and the glides and all that stuff?
Ideally, the human form is designed to move. It's not designed to sit. So the more sedentary you are, the more likely you are to have issues. Unless you have, not unless, if, in addition to that, if you have any issues along the nerve, such as in the spine or in the hips, if you overdo your activity and bother those issues, then that can bother the nerves as well. Does that make sense? I'm not saying like you just have to move all day long,
Right.
but you want to be looking at incorporating more regular movement throughout the day. Are you in a regular walking program? Or are you spending your time at a desk or on Sudoku or Facebook type of things?
Yeah. Okay, all right, and then my next question was, I love chocolate. Is that, I have chocolate every day.
Okay,
Don't judge people, but I love chocolate, so I have chocolate every day.
okay,
The Lindt chocolate, the 70%.
yum.
Yeah, or else I also love M&M's. Is that as far as my I mean, I've had my blood work checked, it's all good.
If your blood sugar is managed,
It is, yeah.
that's
it's not a
good.
problem.
Just be mindful that the caffeine in there can make nerves a little more hyperactive.
Okay,
So if that is something that's going on, I don't off the top of my head know the clearance time for caffeine from your system, but if that is the case, then have it earlier in the day with lunch
Yeah,
instead
I
of
don't have
before
it.
bed.
Okay, okay.
Does
And
that make
then-
sense?
Yes, yes, I will try to.
And some people are caffeine sensitive. Jason, if he drinks any caffeine after lunch, then he's awake all night.
Get it.
Like if he's gonna have caffeine, it's got to be like before 9 a.m.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
depending on how caffeine sensitive you are, that might be something to consider.
Okay, okay. And my last
Uh-huh.
question was the restless leg syndrome.
Um,
Did you address that? Did I get it?
We-
What is restless leg?
Does everyone feel
syndrome?
good with this if I erase it? This is usually the stuff that everyone wants to write down, like the what to do and the 5 key. I'll leave the 5 key things up there. Do you remember us talking about how if you think of the nerve that's aggravated as like you're getting a choked nerve?
Yes.
Oh, someone joining us?
Oh, yeah.
We have an extra person joining.
My wife,
Oh.
she got lost.
Oh, she's welcome to come on in. Sorry, we had a lot of questions, and I'm happy to stay and answer however many questions that we have. So if we look at that kind of spectrum, on the spectrum to cramps, normal, and I guess we could take this on down to like paralyzed, like completely like not working at all. But on the normal to having cramps scale, what I tend to see is restless leg is kind of in this area.
But what is it exactly?
Um,
Is it the same thing as cramps? Is it the
It's not the
thing
same, it's not the same end result, but a lot of people, restless leg will progress to having cramps. And what we look at there is, we see this a lot in people with hypertension issues, with diabetes, with peripheral vascular disease or any type of circulation issue, where they'll have, basically, their nerves aren't happy. And this is like a low-level version where it just kind of, and some people it doesn't even wake up. They just have to move to get a little bit of that movement in the nerve. Does that make sense? How this is kind of like cramp light?
Okay.
So this is where, on that scale of, I shouldn't, instead of say normal, I should say happy nerves,
Yeah.
angry nerves.
So if we're
But-
down there,
Uh-huh.
and most of us are having such severe cramps, we're way up.
Yeah,
there.
you've kind of blown past that already.
We're already past that.
Now, I have some people who will have this, and they'll have it like, they'll be sitting, if they're sitting down watching like a TV program, then like, oh, I just have to move it kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
There's, how do I put this? There's a lot of research that's funded by pharmaceuticals, and what are pharmaceutical companies trying to do?
So,
Sell pharmaceuticals. So a lot of these things, what do they put you on for this? They'll put you on like a gabapentin or a Lyrica or something that's designed to like drop nerve function down a bit. So when we look at those, what are they trying to do? It's other things that are directed towards how do we make the nerves a little happier.
okay.
And no one ever says, why don't we do the basics?
Uh-huh.
They say, here's some medication.
Yeah.
I'll take the money now.
What would gabapentin do to disrupt your body if you know what I'm saying? Would it be a help or a hindrance?
I have some people who it'll help a little bit, but on the whole, we tend to see, I have a lot of people who struggle with gabapentin. And now I will tell you, I'm a little biased there because the people who come to see me are because they weren't able to tolerate some of the medications, which I think is a little bit backwards. I think you should be going for get your body working normally and then use the medications to clean up what's left. But again, I'm biased. I like to get people out of discomfort without medications, injections, or surgeries. That's my passion for being here today.
They have tried to put me on gabapentin and Cymbalta, and I cannot tolerate, either one of them.
And I hear that all the time.
I am just loopy on, I don't
Yeah.
even know which one. I'm like, I can't do that, and I
Yeah.
know it would help the pain in my legs that I have all the time.
But think of it in this way. That's just one thing that drops. If you look at those big blocks of problems, that's only going to drop it a little bit. It's not going to have as big of an effect as making sure you are doing the 5 keys of helping that nerve stay healthy.
And does it actually make the nerves happy? The gabapentin and the other
Well, I've never seen them how to party, but I know that we see patients come in and I don't see the cramping. They're able to sleep longer before getting cramps. They get them less frequently. And this is not I'll tell you, we get people to where we get them down about 50% better and they know what to do. And then we just follow up with them as needed. Because not everybody needs. I have some people who just struggle and they're like, I just need someone to hold me through the whole process. And then I have some people like, yep, I know what to do. Here's what I'm gonna go work on it. And then we're just there as your consultation if needed. But great questions, fantastic questions. We have a wonderful group this morning. Is there anything else that you have questions about?
One last one.
Sure.
I should have written it down. What is your name?
Alaina.
Alaina.
It's Alaina Marino, so it's the name that's on the front door. If you call and ask for the meanest one here, you'll probably talk to my husband and he'll tell you it's me.
So we can all be assured that we don't have any leg diseases. It's just we have unhappy nerves.
For the most part, now there are some rare neurologic issues that doesn't tend to be just at night though. And I will tell you, and I had one of these this last month where I had someone come in that was having these problems where the muscles were cramping up, and they came in, we did our assessment, and we determined this is a neurologic issue. And they actually had to go to a neurologist, and they had a brain issue. But that's why we're trained to be able to pick up on what is and is not appropriate to be here. And in Tennessee, you don't have to see a doctor first. You can come directly here. We do that full assessment, but we do send that report to your physician because I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So those are things to look at in Tennessee. But
You don't have to have a doctor's referral to come here.
not in Tennessee. Now, if you have Medicare, that first visit, we have to make sure we're sending it to the doctor to get signed off on. So usually we'll say, give your doctor a call, tell him you're wanting to try some PT, and that we'll send him a note. And as long as they sign off on that, there's, I think, 2 insurances that require a doctor's order that we typically work with, but Jason calls the doctor's office and takes care of those.
So physiotherapy is the same thing as physical therapy?
My license in the state of Tennessee is a physical therapist.
Okay.
Physiotherapy implies you've gone on to have more advanced training with hands-on techniques and more diagnostic skills.
With your 7 extra certificates?
Yes. Yes, those took a little while. I'm 1 paper and 1 class away from my clinical science PhD right now.
Wow.
So we have to keep learning.
Yeah.
And, but we need to make sure we're spreading that information to the community, which is why we do these free workshops. And we do have some flyers up front if you have other workshops that you're interested in or you think this would be helpful to anyone else. You may get a text message from us that if you've got some good information, please leave us a good review on Google. That's what allows us to, for other people when they look us up, like, are they really just going to do a talk about whatever topic we're talking about? Yes, we want to get the information out there. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I'll hang around for a little while at the front. If you have any questions about wanting to get in to see one of our therapists, we're happy to help you with that as well. And I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.